Okay. Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Play Well here, JB79. We're here for episode 3 of the Leonis report ahead of the 3rd anniversary. We have way too much to talk about, but it is a very exciting session to have, nonetheless, one that we've been looking forward to. JB, you want to say hi? Any thoughts? You doing?
Yeah, so the live stream was awesome. Obviously there was some unexpected moments in there. There was a lot of stuff that we were anticipating, but yeah, it's always good when they surprise us and kind of give us something to look forward to. So
Definitely.
Lot to do today.
Most definitely. Well, obviously the big thing ahead of the 3rd anniversary is the newest unit, Sephiroth. So we are going to kick things off the Battlegrounds of Ardra here, which is a little bit about impressions of what we see for vision cards and equipment reviews, and just talking a little bit some of those things. So before we actually talk about Sephiroth himself, they did release a new, or they will release the Masamune for him, which brand new katana weapon. And then just looking at the stats of it, we were talking about crit rate and crit damage on it. It's got some initial AP of 20 and a lot of good things. I think it's a great katana for him. Any thoughts for you for alternatives, or think it's a pretty decent weapon?
I think, you're going to be using this one in the majority of cases, probably 90 to 95% of the time. Obviously, it has 3 conditional passives, just for Sephiroth, which is super strong. So he's got 4 altogether. That initial AP is super interesting. Seph also, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but he does have AP restore on one of his buffs too. So he's not going to have to rely on bells or anything like that, which is always nice. There's 2 viable builds, I think, for the weapon. It's going to be the assault. I think that's probably the de facto choice in most cases, but I wouldn't sleep on the crit version either. Like 26 crit in 1 slot is really nice, especially when the passives are kind of catered to crit build as well. You get the crit damage and crit rate. So you got 41 crit rate there on 1 slot. That's really strong. He can, you could also take advantage of like crit equipment, things like Thornlid and things like that. He'll be a good candidate for those kind of things. So
most definitely.
Yeah. In terms of like alternatives, there's not really a ton out there. Like I wouldn't use like Purple Lightning but maybe potentially you could look at O's Katana like in the TMR slot. Maybe I think it would have to be like a really specific kind of defensive builds where maybe you were doing something like wearing Umbral Ring and Alex Ring together. That could be kind of interesting.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're taking a pretty big modifier hit by just going for the human killer. Yeah. But you're right, if you are stat stacking, trying to maximize the attack stat, that's probably the best second alternative, because you're right, I don't see any other katanas even coming close to being as good as the Masamune. So yeah, good weapon. Looking forward to throwing it on him, obviously. I know we also have the new vision card from coming out, the Hero vision card. This one obviously looks super pretty. We got some huge modifiers here. 42 slash attack, 32 reaction block rate, which is very unique for a vision card. Obviously that's going to be a brand new thing here where Sephiroth has a bunch of potential counterattacks. We'll talk about that later, but also crit evasion. What do you think about the vision card? Any thoughts, strong or weak?
When you see 42 slash attack, like that kind of jumps off the page a little bit. Like, that's a big modifier, obviously. And the most that we've had is 35, in the first 3 years of the game. So, the job VCs are kind of upping that potential just a little bit. On the other hand, you are giving up potentially some of the elemental, mastery bonuses. So it's kind of offset there a little bit. The reaction block, I think that is one area of the game that Gumi really has been power creeping, especially as we hit this 3rd anniversary and beyond. Like there was already a little bit kind of, in this past year, like you think about Astrius and units like that, there's a lot of good counters that came out, but they've really even upped it even further. Like we're seeing counters that have, not only in Sephiroth's case where he actually has 2 different counters, but there's going to be characters coming in that have 50% or 70% or even 100% on specific damage types that they can counter on. So They're really enhancing the value of reaction block. And yeah, I think maybe in some builds it could be something that you look at for a primary depending on what the target is.
Absolutely. Yeah, my gut says this is probably a sub vision slot, if only because it is, as you said, a job-based vision card. So the application of who it affects really limited, particularly when you look at dark units, if you are trying to putting them in that mono dark team. But the modifiers are high enough. It still has some good impact, and I know we're getting a global buff for him where he's getting that extra elemental resistance, which is great.
That's an insane buff.
Yeah, I'm sure even in the sub vision card slot, it'll still be material enough. Every little bit helps. But yeah, I have tempered expectations for this vision card just because it really does seem solely centered around amplifying him, and even then, you want to make sure your team is still well rounded. So good, I mean, great vision card, but probably a limited ceiling, I think, for what we're going to see.
Yeah, I think the thing is with the Katana job group really hasn't been developed. Like they put out this card, and there really hasn't been a lot else since. I think even up through JP's timeline, I think they have 3 Katana cards, I want to say.
Yep.
So it's just they're kind of picking and choosing which groups they're amplifying, within the different weapon types. So Katana is just not one that they've circled back to. You mentioned the global buff there. I'm kind of thinking it's probably 5%. I think anything higher than that is probably going to be a little bit
Pretty busted.
too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, at that point, you're looking at 3% in the sub slot, which is still pretty solid.
Definitely.
So
yeah, I agree. Good. Well, moving along here, we also have Class Match coming out this week. Ancient Ruins 2 is a map that I think is new to Global. I don't recall that we've ever had it before, but the initial placements for Class Match vary, so we don't exactly know where they'll end up. But I also know that we have we have rules. Cost limit 220 for the units, and there's a slew of status effects that are null. So Quicken and Haste at the minimum of 2, but then Confuse, Berserk, and Stun, which and Immobilize and Disable, which a little more, I don't want to say uncommon, but you don't see them as often. But regardless, it's nice that won't be a factor in it at all. Any hopes for Class Match here? I know you typically try to compete pretty hard.
yeah, if it's the map that I'm thinking of, I think that we have had it one time, and I want to say it was around Final Fantasy 15. I want to say.
Got it. Yep.
I'm not 100% positive on that, but I think that we did have this one. If it's the map I'm thinking of, it kind of has like a big kind of raised pillar in the middle.
Right.
And then like missile units were like super good from the trenches if they had arcing shots.
I remember this.
They could kind of they could kind of hit over or hit on top. But then also, dragoons and units that have really high jump, like they can go right across the middle. So it's an interesting map. Obviously, it's super long too. It's got that 14 length. So you have kind of the pillars on each corner of the map too that get up to that range height 5.
Yep.
So that's another archer perch that you can move up on. Obviously, that's more. I'm talking more manual play. Obviously, the AI isn't going to do that, but I liked this map when we had it the first time.
This map is wild. Just looking at it, because you're right. It is one of the longer maps, 14 tiles across. An immense amount of height variations here, where you're starting off in the 1s and 2s and 0s. Obviously, there's those pillars in the middle which go up to 5. Very awkward to traverse if you're talking about pathing for characters that only have a jump of 1. And obviously, once you start throwing in the initial placements as well, anything's possible on this map. So very interested to see what people do come out with here.
I have to pour one out for the crystals. If you can see them, the purple slots there on the picture.
Yes.
Unfortunately, they took those out of Class Match. I think that was a big mistake. I really liked the strategic element that those crystals and kind of kind of claiming that the territory where they were. I really liked that aspect of the gameplay, and I really wish they would bring them back.
I agree. I actually, now that you say this, I very vividly remember these crystals and how they impacted even in the auto side of things, because the AI would prioritize them for some of their movement in ways that you wouldn't expect, and there'd be fights where you thought they were over, and all of a sudden your character gets to move to one of these, and anything's possible again. So, yeah, good point on bringing that up.
Yeah, it's an interesting rule set. You mentioned they're pretty much nullifying time mages completely. There's no quicken, no haste. All the status effects are gone. 220 cost, so it's pretty restrictive.
I like that though. The cost unit, cost limitation is still one of my favorite things, where it allows other units to shine. You can't just, brute force a couple 100 units at it, or if you do, you really have to tailor your strategy against around that one unit. So we'll see what 220 can come up with.
You're rocking Zazan or Slime at that point if you're bringing 100 costs, which at least in manual play, those units are really good. So
it's true.
We tend to do that.
It's true. So good. All right. And then on that note of manual and other types of PvP content that is outside the norm for Guild Wars, we do have the PvP tournaments returning from the official War of the Visions channel, which is obviously really cool to see. I know they kind of kicked that off a couple weeks ago. I'm excited for it. I will say I do think they're making a excellent push to do this on their platform. There obviously was a demand for this where RNJ is doing Friday Night Fights and Keishan's doing the Draft League and there, Lukavi does a tournament. So I do think there is a little bit of a saturation for the community as a whole for how many tournaments there are. I think you might see a little burnout in terms of people applying to some of the guild sponsored ones, but I very much give Gumi the thumbs up for having an actual official tournament just for what it does to like more centralize them and bring some attention and visibility to it. And obviously they bring in great shoutcasters like RNJ to kind of bring some life to it. So definitely a big fan of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the first one that they did recently was a success. I was hoping they would do another one. I didn't expect it to come back so soon.
Nope.
So that was really awesome. So I think they're really trying to kind of capitalize on the momentum that they had there on the first one. Obviously, a lot of kind of putting these together is kind of that initial groundwork and kind of setting up the, all of the, infrastructure, so to say, of the discords and, all of the red tape that they had to go through. But I think that they have really improved it this time too. Not only are they adding in like different time slots and regions that we'll add like qualifiers essentially before we actually get to the finals. But then there is also real prizes on there too. Like first prize is 100K Visior. Like that is it's a nice bank there for third anniversary.
That's awesome. Seriously, that'll get you a long way.
Yeah, and then also, I mean, so the prizes there, that's kind of like it makes it almost like an official esport for more divisions. And then if they do have like the different qualifiers, I hope that all of them are kind of like shoutcasted, like maybe a few rounds or at least highlights, and put them up on the YouTube channel. They actually did an edit of the last tournament. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
They posted that a couple weeks ago, and the editing, they did an amazing job on it. It was really hyped. So yeah, I'd love to see more of those.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes the game feel a little more alive. Where sometimes it really does feel like copy and paste, where it's like, oh, okay, we're just getting the JP leftovers, and they're just pushing things live, and there's mistakes when they push things live. You can very clearly tell it. You know what I mean? Like you can tell it's just a copy paste. But for them to actually take the time to like have the community, like Justin and friends, and the their mods to reach out and be more interactive, it really does make the game feel a little more live, which obviously does feel good. So thumbs up to them.
Yeah, I want to give props to Gumi here too, because I did make a video. It was probably like 9 months ago where I was kind of really down on the state of the whole kind of free match and manual PvP and basically everything like within the match battle game area. And I feel like this tournament and then them kind of bringing back class match early, we've kind of diverged in our class match rule sets where we're not just getting the JP hand-me-downs anymore. We kind of are having our own rule sets.
Yep.
So I feel like a little bit of that is in response to that and kind of the some of the comments and outpour that we got from the community over that. So I do want to give a little bit of props to Gumi there.
Absolutely. Right, because they can't bend over backwards to accommodate everything that we want. There's limitations, whether it's staffing or budget or who knows what. So, it's good that they saw this as an opportunity to be a little flexible and have some fun with it. So, everyone keeps supporting them, and we'd like to see more content like that, obviously. All right, so then next we're moving on to the War Room here, which is a little more about game updates and map, unit reviews and meta formations. Kind of an overlap of what we were just talking about. But the biggest thing this week are we getting 4 new job updates. And we won't necessarily go through these intricately per se, but we are seeing upgrades to the Operative, the Viking, the Cleric, and the Devout jobs, which, a lot of these are more popular as of late. Devout in particular, everyone seems to have. Operative, you're seeing more with Perrine and Sweetheart Eldyra being pretty popular. Any thoughts in particular, JB, for things that stand out for any of these off the top of your head?
Yeah, so just looking at, I guess we'll just go through and touch on each one real quick. But Operative, obviously that is Sweetheart Eldyra. We saw that job get introduced with her. Since then, we've seen it on Renelle, and then more recently we've seen it with Perrine. But it's getting a couple of good buffs. I think the best one that it's getting out of everything is to the Shadow Dance, which is their 30% all damage barrier. That's getting a 5% AP restore. So I think that's pretty nice. They again kind of breaking away from Bells a little bit. The Blinding Trinity move, which is like the AoE 3-hit chain. It's a really nice skill.
Yep.
That's now going to remove AP restore and haste. and it does that in across AoE. So that's a nice little buff for that. And then Toxic Assaults, that adds a slash res 25% imperil. So that I think is fine. I think that skill is just super limited in its range.
No, and I'm a fan of the AP auto restore too. I think one of the best things Gumi's done as of late is increase the amount of characters that have, even if it's small, like a 5% AP regen. Or I know like Resnick the Hoppy is one, her buff gives her just a flat 20 AP. Or we're seeing on some of these weapons, they just give 20 AP. That they're allowing characters to just kind of play and use their abilities without worrying as much about bells or buff order, because it can be kind of hard for some of those newer players or casual players to really think that hard about how much AP and calculate how many skills they can use. And you just want to see your units go and fight. You don't want to see them give up halfway through and start basic attacking, and that's not fun either. So obviously I like that kind of thing. So we also have the Viking here too. So
yeah, what do you think about Viking?
So on paper, I really do like it, but I know that some of my favorites here aren't applicable to every of the Viking sub jobs. I know one of my favorites here is the full-bodied blow, that it's getting some height flexibility and extra usage. It is a defense break as well as the slash res break and the reaction rate ability decrease. So XL damage, I like it, but not every Viking sub job has it. Most of them don't. Little unfortunate from that regard. But the one thing I do like in particular is Rebellious Spirit, what it's getting for a buff here, where it is getting the increase to attack and defense, which it normally had, but it's also getting defense piercing rate, which I think is exceptionally good for a character who I think is going to probably come more to the limelight sometime in the future. We don't know how much, but Dwayne in particular. One of the reasons why I do like this on him is one of his biggest downfalls, in my opinion, at the moment is from a movement perspective, you really do have to use Atonement, which is his teammate buff, to get that slash attack and defense penetration up. And I don't like him moving toward a teammate if he's supposed to be frontlining to start the fight. I love this buff on the sub job for him to be able to kind of be that offensive tank that he's supposed to be and still get that attack buff and the defense piercing and kind of do his job. So overall, this is on paper a decent one. Unyielding protection. This passive gets a missile res buff up. I think it went from 15 to 25 or 10 to 20, 12 to 25, something like that. But either way, this is overall a good upgrade. And Yerma in particular does benefit quite a lot. She does get a good offensive boost from this.
Yeah, so one other thing I think is kind of interesting from Viking is the reaction ability, Fighting Spirits. As of today, like all it did was kind of give you a chance to like berserk yourself for 25%, which nobody really wants to do. Like, yeah, it increases your auto attack damage, but then like, you're pretty much on, you're not able to use any of your skills.
No, when you take more damage, you take significant
more
damage.
You take more damage.
I don't understand why. Yeah.
So it's like, it was like kind of just a meme reaction ability. I think they've kind of have made it kind of interesting now. It's going to add a 25% chance to 20% chance to heal 25% flat of your HP bar.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Like you can always put like a Trust Stone passive for the Berserk resistance, and then just nullify the rest of that counter and just take it as kind of an auto cure, so to say.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting one too.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you pointed that out. I under the radar, good potential if you don't have a better counter ability to supplant it. So yeah.
If you're like a big Yerma fan, that could be a good one.
Right. The cleric one I know is one that I think you'd mentioned is a little bit later than when JP got it, but this, I mean, we can't go through them all, but there's a significant amount of changes here. They're all very, very good, quite honestly, in terms of what they do for versatility, going from cross shapes to diamonds and range 3 to range 5, and debuffs and attributes is just way more yellow here than any other ability here. They're getting a passive upgrade here, where Spirit up level 1 is also increasing agility.
Yeah, that's huge.
Big, right?
15%, 12% agility, sorry.
Yep. Cleric is not one of the more popular jobs I think you see, but, Mashri immediately comes to mind in terms of what she gets for upgrades to this. She's a unit that's always lagged behind, but is one of the new 140 units here. And I'll be honest, I think she does have a competitive argument to be made with Sylvie when you look at some of these improvements, particularly the Calamity Stronghold, where like this ability gives your team, and I'm just going to recap here, it bestows a barrier on your allies. Like, why need a Sylvie limit break if you can just use this on command on Calamity Guard, in addition to everything else it does? I mean, it's just genuinely really good upgrades to her overall. And I think there are some of the characters who would benefit. I think you'd mentioned one earlier, if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so Agrius actually gets does have cleric as a sub job, and that agility, she's going to have two different agility passives now, so that's pretty cool. Obviously, Knight's Honor I think is her other one that has it today. So now she's going to be able to use this Spirit Up and 12% agility. So that's really cool. The other thing that I like, when you talk about Mashiri, her Job 25 ability gets an additional range on it. So that's going up to a 5 range now.
Yes.
And it does have a range height too, so it's like a really flexible attack. It's a big 200% mod. So yeah, for 70 costs, like she's gonna be, I think, pretty interesting. Like I've seen her used here and there, but I think the barrier makes a pretty big deal, especially in that big, diamond pattern that you can buff with it. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good. All right. And then the last one here, we'll keep moving along here, is the Devout upgrade. There's a couple good ones on here, but I don't think they in practice. Dream Inducer here does get an all elemental res debuff, but this is not an offensive ability that gets used often enough on the Devout jobs. Teachings of self-preservation, also one that typically recommended to be off, believe it or not. I don't think this increase will be enough to prioritize it. Most Devout jobs have more preferable skills to use. Law of Invigoration is nice that it got an extra use here.
that's big.
Yeah, it is big. I mean, that's that's one of the primary jobs is to continue to spam that. And
Yeah.
Devout Intuition, I think, is probably the one that my biggest takeaway, where I really appreciate the defense and spirit passive, and they'd always nerfed the magic attack by 20. That nerf will now only be decreased by 8 instead of 20. So characters like I think you'd said earlier, Sodali, I think of Renan immediately. That
Hmm.
you want to use this to give them some bulk, but you don't want to also trade off that offensive output. So, yeah, I think overall thumbs up for what they did here.
I do like the I got to shout out Minwoo here getting Ultima going over to a guaranteed hit.
Yep, she needed that.
And then it's going to raise like her tankiness as well on there too. So
Definitely,
yeah,
definitely.
I mean, Minwoo I think is a unit that's really loved in the manual scene. I've actually within even auto, for like a fire team like going into ice, I think she's pretty good too. But
Yep,
yeah, I really like that upgrade.
definitely. Yeah, I've used her with relatively low success for the moment, but that I think was more a reflection of fire at the time than her. This obviously does nice things, and so doesn't the job upgrades overall. And small shout out too for Resnick's Law of Refuge, where this now nullifies Charm and Frostbite for 3 turns.
Like
Where
that.
right, like Charm obviously for Sadali when you talk about his limit break, but even Frostbite, we kind of forget about it. But that's one of the things that Alaya and even Curry to say Frostbite enablers. That certainly does help immensely. So overall, big thumbs up for what they try to do here for that job.
Yeah, so I don't think that there's a ton of jobs left at this point. I know Cleric was one of the ones that we were waiting on for a while.
Mhm.
I think Assassin is still in the wait. So I'm looking forward to that one.
I don't
But
even know who's
yeah,
Venera. Who's Assassin? Aldoa.
Venera, Oldoa,
Yeah.
Ruin Stern has it.
Good point. Yep. That's it for the job updates for now. We did want to touch briefly on the limited Guild War. We talked about class match, but they are implementing the total team cost once again, 550. That includes Esper's vision cards. Obviously, you have to get really creative with what you do to either limit or include what you want to do. But we are getting the map of Ancient Ruins 3. It is attack and spirit up. My guess is probably skewed a little more towards helping Sephiroth out, where he obviously doesn't have any kind of real magic tankiness per se. It helps a lot of units, not just him, obviously, but everyone's going to be using
Yeah.
him, so certainly benefits. If we are going to look at the map quickly, though, here, this
Yeah,
is
neither of the effects, at least from the notice, are element specific, which is good.
this is a very interesting map, though. That it's not interesting in like unique layout. I thought it was very funny that the heights all are 3, 4, 5, 6, as opposed to like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like I don't know why they went so high unnecessarily, but it does seem relatively flat through most of the middle of the section here. Obviously, when you talk about characters with those giant diamond AOE's, this is gonna overlay like a majority of the team fight area. Starting positions, I don't know exactly what's going to happen here for Guild Wars, where you have your 3 predetermined ones, but I'd imagine they're pretty standard spots. Yeah, should be a good map overall. Seems pretty easy to buff on.
Yeah, now that I see the range heights here, I remember this map. It's definitely one that we've had in class match a couple times, and in quick pick, I think, as well. But yeah, the you kind of start on the outside of kind of it's almost like it's like a raised kind of board
Mhm.
is kind of like the look to it, and then it has like those kind of deep little valleys kind of next to the middle skirmish area there, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it does create kind of a natural funnel where everyone's going to
Hmm.
end up toward and just get obliterated in one sense or the other. But no, yeah, looking forward to that. Obviously, limited guild wars is always kind of fun to throw into the mix, but I think that's all we really have to talk about at the moment for that. We want to get to some more of the meatier topics with third anniversary coming, and so we'll kind
Yep.
of move along. If I'm sure no one here will complain about that. Which takes us to the Transcendence system. So, boy,
Big
did we get
update.
a lot of notice updates on that this week from that. Where to even start? I mean, do you want to give a recap? Awakening versus Reincarnation, the differences between the two?
Yeah, so I think that there's almost like two facets of it, and kind of like depending on how serious or competitive of a player that you are, you could only partake in one of them, and I think be perfectly fine. And that's what I think they're calling transcendence, which is actually the awakening, up to 140, and that's going to be like they're calling them antlers or whatever.
Yep.
But that's going to just get you that awakening, like we used broadstones before to get to level 120. And then you'll get another access to another 20 levels and another mastery ability and some stats. The other portion of it is the reincarnation, where you can essentially re-roll your stats up to, I think in JP it was calculated up to 84 times is the maximum, which is pretty rough.
Yep.
But that is going to be the scrolls, and that's the usage of the scrolls is that okay, you want to start building up those stats over time and get them min-max the character essentially at that point. Maybe you have a favorite, or maybe it's a meta unit, or you're going to have to kind of make those decisions. So
Definitely.
that's essentially what it is in a nutshell.
Yeah. I think one of the coolest things about the reincarnation system, which is that re-leveling, or re-rolling, if you will, is that each character has its own class of how many stats it can get depending upon its class. And they have like a tank build, there's a physical attacker, there's a magical attacker, there's an evade build. I think it's up to 5. It's definitely not more than that. It's either 4 or 5. But I like that because it does kind of still maintain some equality when you talk about different characters where they get the same potential benefits. It's not like certain characters, they get their reincarnation based off their base stats, which obviously some characters have stronger ones than others. The system overall is very complex and cumbersome, and even myself, I need to like really get in there and do it myself before I feel comfortable advising, kind of seeing how
Hmm.
what it does. But at the very least, I love the awakening system, which is the first one, where I almost just consider these like additional MA2s because it's kind of like what they are, right? It's basically just
Yeah.
additional mastery abilities. They find creative ways to upgrade the character, and either most instances they will upgrade a skill, whether passive ability or an active ability, and then yeah, just some stat rounding out. A lot of times it's cast time down or a penetration or HP or agility or something. But either way, you love to see it because particularly for some of these older characters that don't always get mastery abilities that you want. So the fact that they get a third one here, definitely really cool.
Yeah, so one thing about I want to give props to Gumi on one thing with the awakenings, and that finally are introduced a new sort of creep or power creep system that has the awakening materials for each tier right from the get-go.
Yes.
Obviously, that's something that we still don't have for blossoms and like EXing a unit. I don't know why it's not in there yet. But at least with the 140 system, you're going to be able to work on, maybe you're saving up for your next UR unit. You don't have the scrolls or antlers or whatever, but okay, now I've gotten some MR or SR scrolls, and I can start working on and tinkering with some of the lower tier units, and it's not going to impede me from working on URs later. So I like that a lot. I'm glad that that's in there. I think that's probably the best thing about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Other than just getting being able to go back and kind of revisit some old units.
Yep. I will say it is a moment where I have to like remember, yeah, what everyone's getting for upgrades, in addition to the job upgrades and everything. But it's a good thing. It just takes a lot to obviously remember
Yeah.
at all times. But but no, yeah, there's obviously some controversy, if you will, around this too. Not everyone is excited for it. There are some legitimate concerns that I think I've talked about. You've probably talked about as well. We've talked about how it impacts the spenders. Do you have any strong opinions on that so far? If you would, anything here from that perspective?
Well, I mean, we can only kind of say based on what we know from JP. It seems like they're might not be changing it, but we don't know until the data comes in on Wednesday. I mean, at least from JP, it's fairly pricey to fully reincarnate a unit. There's like a number of scrolls that are available just from paid viz, and then there's some that you can get from free viz. But it's to you need to get 1,600 scrolls to max out somebody essentially. And if you're competing at the very tops of the game, there's going to be people doing that. I think there's a lot of people that aren't going to be doing it too. Like maybe it's like I said, it is expensive, so it's going to cut some people out, and I think that's where the frustrations are coming from. Obviously, Gumi can kind of soften that a little bit by how generous they are with some of the freebies, login rewards and just handouts. We've seen a little bit of that with some of the promotions, and hopefully that doesn't dry up, after third anniversary. Hopefully that continues. That's something that we'll have to kind of see what happens over time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I don't think we've actually recapped like the costs. If I recall, each reincarnation is 2,000 viz. It's 20 mind spheres of the character. So for those lower rated characters, you probably have a bunch of them because of the dupes that you pull from your pulls. But for UR units, you're talking 1,600 extra shards for a unit. That's exceptionally high. I immediately think of like collaboration units where I'm like, how in the world do you expect anyone to pull 1,600 extra character shards in addition to what you already pulled 1,000 to 120 them, in addition to not even talking about fragments of thought and the awakening materials, which at least those, there's a lot of tickets that you can use to pull them. I know some veterans probably have a gluttonous amount of them just from the monthly farming of the selection quests. But then you also talk about the rainbow cubes. Like the rainbow cubes are actually, you need a lot of them to go up to 140 every time. It is a very, very big investment. Even the top spenders, because I mean, to be frank, I consider myself one of them. I know you likely do too, and many others. Even myself, I am not diving headfirst into this. It is a significant cost, because the thing that you don't even mention is the cost to still pull the units in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Like this is just the cost to reincarnate them. So a lot of people, for good reasons, are averse to this. I will say though, I have hope, because I think we're all in the same boat on that opinion. And even the top of the game, I don't think you're going to see people going nuts with it. I don't think you're going to see nearly as many reincarnated units as you might think, or at least not as fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, we're both big spenders. I mean, I'm approaching Royal Rank 14. I think you're already there.
Yeah, I'm well into it. Yeah.
So, I mean, we've spent some dough on the game, and I still spend every day at least $1. So it's too much. It's way too much. There's going to be people out there that are doing it. It's not going to be a lot of. I really don't think it's going to be a lot of people. At least once we get past Sephiroth and people kind of get it out of their system on that first unit. It's not like every new unit that comes out is going to be heavily reincarnated. It's just not sustainable for really anyone. It's prohibitively expensive.
And then I know we were even talking about like what's the glance at it from a top end play, say top 10 guilds, and what that impact has. I'll be honest, I don't know if it's going to have an enormous impact. It's going to have a big impact, don't get me wrong. And the guilds that can have the most members that can afford to reincarnate will likely do a lot better. That being said, I think one of the things that people underrate when it comes to the top 5, top 10 guilds is the amount of in-step coordination that everyone has to have. Because for those of you that aren't aware, every guild builds what they call a wall or a macro for defense. And that essentially means 30 of the same exact teams. The theory is basically you have more of one type of team than your opponent has attack teams to beat that. Where that comes to a crossroads here is you're not going to get 30 people that are all equally going ham on the reincarnation system. You're gonna get like maybe 4 or 5, and that's where I say like I don't know if you have the incentive to reincarnate units, because if you're only 4 or 5 out of your guild of 30, you're not necessarily giving. I mean, you might give your guild a somewhat of an advantage. You likely will, obviously, but even on attack, then when you start talking about attack teams, I know we do. Strategizing. Hey, this team works. This team doesn't. Well, now all of a sudden it's like, well, this team works, but you have to be reincarnated at this level, or else it doesn't work. It's just a lot of chaos. It's a lot of extra stuff that it's going to impact it. And obviously you win a couple guild wars by like, 3 stars or less. And that's certainly going to turn the tides if you can guarantee some extra stars. But I just don't know if it's going to be as widespread when you also just consider what it does to barrier your incoming potential other players to your guild. Where if you have wall requirements, like, hey, you need XXXX all reincarnated for our walls, you're going to immediately like lock out a bunch of people because they don't have those units reincarnated, and it's not feasible to do it overnight. You know what I mean? So like, there's some major ramifications to what it actually does structurally at the top end of the game.
And I think, there's a lot of players that, play maybe in the top 100 or even beyond that, maybe top 500, wherever. I think that the impacts of it are going to be not as well felt, I think, in those areas of the game.
Not at all. Not at all.
I think, today, I mean, you have a few whales per team or something of that nature, and they kind of carry things. Everybody else is kind of, playing more casually. And this is definitely a hardcore system. It's kind of made for endgame. It's the thought and design for it is something that you do over a long period of time.
Exactly.
But obviously, like when players are in that competitive mindset and trying to get every little edge that they can, that's going to want that person to sort of rush those units, and obviously that's going to take a lot of spending and a lot of resources in order to do it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I hope that there has been some backlash to it in JP, and I know players over there have left and that they don't like it, and I think Gumi has heard that message. Part of them, kind of trying to address it a little bit here is hopefully being a bit more generous with the resources, so that not only is that going to soften the cost for people who spend, but it's also going to raise the floor of free-to-play players and have them be able to get in there and reincarnate units as well. So only time is going to tell exactly how it's going to pan out.
Yeah.
Personally, I think I'm going to get in there and I'm going to dabble with it, and I'll probably work on Sephiroth because he's a character that I'm excited about, or maybe Yuffie. I haven't fully decided which direction I'm going to go, but there's no way that I'm going to reincarnate multiple units, at least right off the bat. I don't think that's a good move for anybody, really.
No, definitely not. Particularly when you're getting global exclusives that might change the landscape as you see fit.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that I feel particularly bad about is PvE content, where, as I was just talking about, PvP content really is the sum of its parts to give you the results that you need. But PvE is very individualized. It's like what you can do specifically. And now all of a sudden, those top PvE, like Trials of Reckoning scores, you really are going to have to like pay to win. You're not going to be able to compete with those top scores if you're going against someone who's going to reincarnate a limited bonus unit. That's just like literally not economical. If you were to say tomorrow, I know we have a Trials of Reckoning coming out that I think the Final Fantasy VII characters are the bonus units for. It is straight up not economical to reincarnate your Final Fantasy VII units. But someone's going to do it at the top end of PvE, and they're going to obliterate the scores of anyone under them because you're going to get those extra attack stats and whatnot. So that, guild raids, I know your love. So like, I feel really bad that that's not going to be.
I'm definitely worried for that stuff.
Yeah. This is going to be a big impact.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure how big the impact is going to be yet, because for some units already, even at 120, it's you can cap right from turn one. So I think that there's ways that you can work around it a little bit by setting up specific turn orders and things, but it definitely, like, if you have one unit, it's like, say, Barrett, like, it early on in the chains, it's very hard for him to cap out his damage. But so that is one thing that, okay, I'm just going to reincarnate Barrett, and I have the resources to do that. So that's kind of a problem. I'm a little bit worried about that. So yeah. Again, we have to kind of see what's going to happen, I think, though.
But I
hope it's not too bad.
I don't think so either. But I agree with you. People outside of that, I don't think it's going to be felt for most. I'm still of the opinion that, like most people, there's probably other things you can work on in terms of getting your turn order right, your agility right, your trust stones in order. Like there's a pecking order of things that are probably more important to fix than focusing on the reincarnation. But yeah, I'm hoping Gumi does something to be a smidge more generous or economical about it.
And then I think eventually, because of what's happened in JP, in terms of like development and changes for the game, like the JP side really leads the way. Like we're obviously, we don't generate as much money here for the game, so they definitely prioritize that side. It was, the game was designed, it came out there originally, so
yep.
I'm hoping that some longer term thing to fix the system is already in the works, and maybe we'll see some of those QOLs coming in on that side.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk quickly on it because obviously there's a lot of characters who got their awakenings or will in this first week here. Like I said, Final Fantasy VII units, Sephiroth, but even some of the older, let's say, main cast units of the game. I know King Mont, Mashri, Eld, Stern, Oberyn, Medina. Anyone in particular that you really like here? You mentioned Sephiroth, but is there anyone
Yeah.
that you're excited for here?
Well, I have been really excited for King Mont, and I really have been wanting to kind of, do some reincarnation on him. He's one of my favorite characters, one of my favorite manual PvP units.
Absolutely.
But then the rule set for CM like really is not good for him because they're eliminating Berserk, they're eliminating Disable. I don't know. I might have to go a different direction.
Yeah, or at least just wait a little while.
So we are getting right away, as they had kind of promised to us when they did the rerun for Warrior of Light. He's getting his awakening right away as the system opens up.
Yep.
And that's different from JP. He didn't get his awakening for maybe about a month or maybe like 5-6 weeks into the system. So he's coming right away in batch 1, so that's kind of interesting.
I'm sad they didn't rerun him at all. I'm actually I'm not going to say mad, but like I'm kind of mad. They reran him 2 months ago before they announced it globally, and obviously we all knew the reincarnation system was coming, but we didn't know, not everyone knew everything about it. But now you're going to give him the 140 with no access to get his shards via shops. Do you know, like I hate that.
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
And there is a conversion system where you can convert 5 to 1, but that's just less economical. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of irked.
Yeah, so I think that's the only change from the first batch on JP that I can think of here, looking at the units.
Yep.
But these are going to be coming in rapid fire. Like in JP, they were coming out like every week or every 2 weeks. A bunch of units. So this is a much faster process than the EX upgrades were, or even the MA2s or any of that stuff.
Yep.
These I think their plan is to get through all the units, like I want to say like within 6 months or maybe 9 months or something like that. But it's going to be a lot quicker than anything we've seen before in terms of these upgrades.
And that makes sense too, because like as you mentioned, this is really meant to be a slower burn over time, where as you get the resources, you can slowly do a level here, level there, and upgrade them. And it's better to get all the units their access to do so sooner rather than later, where you don't want to wait a year to finally start your Garvel reincarnation. You know what I mean? He's going to be way too behind at that point. So yeah, no, it's good that they're coming out here soon. And yeah, I'm the same. King Mont, I'm really a fan of. I'm a fire lover as an element, so I do love him particularly. We'll talk about him in a second with Hyoh coming out and what fire might evolve into. I talked about Mashri. I really like what she does for her job upgrades, so I think her reincarnation also has a case to be made, and Sephiroth obviously too, just because he's kind of this S tier character in his own way. But yeah, other than that, I'm holding off at the moment before I go too nuts and anyone else.
Yeah. What do you think about Amnelis? I know that a lot of people have been kind of a little bit underwhelmed since we got essentially like a nerfed, 120 version that never existed in JP of her. She's getting her 140 awakening here as the system comes out.
Yeah, so hers is relatively material, just in a small sense that kind of goes under the radar. Number one, she is getting extra 20 spirit penetration, so that is a decent offensive output upgrade where she's got 40 on the passive, now 20 on the dream ability. She also gets a decrease to the skill activation time of 100, which is a breakpoint for a couple of her abilities, so you will see her casting a smidge faster. They do upgrade one of her skills, but I don't think the upgrade is all that great. It's essentially her Dispel one. She will absorb some of the damage, but because of the range of it and the modifier, I don't see it being used in auto anyway, so that one's relatively small. So hers... I like it. It will have some significant changes. I'm tempering my expectations though, because the biggest demerit against Amnelis and some of the water cast is how inaccurate they are. And given how evasive fire is, that elemental matchup just doesn't jive.
Yeah, the other thing like with water is and Amnelis, like they're very anti-magic too. You think about Celis, Aerith, Amnelis. They do have a couple people that are kind of, Perrine and Astrius. Obviously, they're a bit more physically, bruising. But yeah, it's kind of a tough matchup, especially against Yuffie.
Yeah. Yep. Yuffie, Psaro, King Mont, Sweetheart Elvira, very tough. Hyoh looks to be physical, at least. Probably will be, but we'll see. But yeah, I mean, Kefka and Roy Mustang, they're going to be eating well, but that's not for quite some time.
What about some of these low rarity? So we got 3 MR and SRs coming in. Are any of those perk your interest?
Yeah, so the 3 lower rarity units, it's Mont, Nasha, and Little Leela. The Mont one, I actually do like, because Mont is a good unit overall. His is some missile increase, missile resistance increase, as well as 10% elemental.
Yeah, all elemental.
Which we've seen on King Mont, obviously really great. Sephiroth, that's really great. Earth doesn't really have a good dedicated tank. We both are high on Miraga for certain reasons, but obviously Mont's kind of similar, physical tank. But either way, I don't know if it's a good investment, but I like it. I think Little Leela might be the best one out of them, though. Little Leela does have a very interesting profile as a magic tank and what she can do, and hers I've seen for some limited Guild Wars has some weirdly good upside, believe it or not.
Yeah, so she gets 15% HP. She gets 5 initial hate, which is probably one of the biggest things for her, at least from an auto PvP's perspective.
Yep.
She can essentially be a functional tank now, where she was only relying on the active, taunting spell before.
Correct. Yep.
And then she does have an increase here on the job 25, which is that big diamond silence. It gets another 22% chance to silence, which is pretty crazy.
Yep.
And she has a passive which also increases by 20%. So it's essentially like a limit burst percentage, 67% to land silence. Huge AoE.
Awesome.
It's a really, really good skill.
Yep, particularly for Dark, where there's not a lot of characters that have that tanking ability. So she's just a fun X factor to throw in there from a low cost perspective.
Especially when you think about like some of the Dark units being weak against magic too. You can bring in a character that can come in and silence everybody. Well, that's one way to shut them down.
It's exactly it. Yep. But that finally leads us to the biggest name of the Dream Reincarnations is Sephiroth. So we obviously will do our own character reviews. I know you did a looking forward video quite some time ago about him, but obviously we'll kind of talk about what we know now that he's actually here, and we can kind of think about things more rationally. I know we're going to talk about what makes the character great, and then a little bit about the weakness. We'll obviously go far more in depth about that in the character reviews themselves. But the first thing that stands out to me when I look at Sephiroth is when you look at the meta over the past 8 months to a year. There's a lot of characteristics that characters typically have, which courage, re-raise, some kind of barrier, a lot of other things that add some sustain. And he comes in and immediately shuts down a lot of that. So on his limit break, it's both dispel, re-raise, and dispel courage all in one on a giant AoE attack. He does also have a giant AoE break general barrier, which is immensely powerful. A lot of you that were running Dark Lucia or Halloween Lucia are going to immediately feel why she was a 70 cost unit once he's able to do that. You probably have already felt that if you've been seeing any Psaros with his AoE barrier break. But yeah, Sephiroth does obviously not only in addition to those things, but has an immense amount of offensive output where he's got above average defense penetration, 50 on the passive as opposed to the normal 40. He's got a buff that will give him a counter ability with an 80% chance to proc, and he's got enough penetrations innately for like slash res pen and whatnot that it's just the kind of damage that you really can't mitigate very well. So yeah, a lot of things that I think a lot of people are going to get sustained success out of for a very long time because he just counters so many of the gimmicky parts of the game very easily. So I think a lot of people will benefit from that. Not including the 100% guaranteed hit chance on one of his main job, and his limit break is 100% hit chance. So very very easy to do some of those things. But yeah, what do you think for any strengths on him?
I mean, he's a character that just has very few flaws. Overall good stats. All across the board. He has an agility passive. That's he is a little bit slower if you don't use that. Certainly in auto, I think players might have that one turned off just because the movement that's added in there.
Right.
But for manual PvP, like he's going to be super good. That's mobility is king there. So I think a lot of players are going to pull for him, especially where he has no. He's essentially eliminated his elemental weakness by having that omni resist. His attack value, like you can use self-sacrifice, and that can get through the roof. What do you think about using self-sacrifice? Do you like the trade-off now that Soldier has got the it's only -3 to the resist instead of 8.
I love it. I actually do think that's a very, very strong buff for the passive ability. 60% is a very strong threshold for extra attack stat, not including what you get for active buffs after that. So I'm a big fan of that. I don't think -3 in this current state of the game is enough to really like be the difference between dying sooner or later than you would have already, if that makes sense.
So he's also going to be amazing for PvE. He's got a 3-hit chain. He's got and it has a defense break on it. So that's one thing for high-end guild raid that you're looking for. You're looking for debuffs that have a chain. So kind of really get more hits, onto the boss. So he's going to be great there. Really, the only sort of flaw I would say is the lack of an elemental in peril.
Yeah.
He can get around pretty much everything else. Like you said, he can dispel courage and re-raise. He can take care of barriers. Protect, I think, is another thing that he can't really get around. So, I mean, that's just a couple of things there. Aside from that, everything else is super good.
Anything
he himself, his main survivability, other than that omni-resist, is his own barrier. He's got a 50% all damage barrier. So obviously, if you're able to dispel that, that's the best way to be able to get at him. Especially if it's a magic unit that is doing that, because he's definitely much more bulky when it comes to physical damage.
Right, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So aside from that, what are you thinking of? Did you see any other weaknesses here other than that?
No, I mean, like you mentioned, he is susceptible to magic just overall. I do think one of the things that is probably one of his biggest weaknesses, though, is how disproportionately strong his limit break is. There's a lot of people that are going to rely on that limit break to essentially hit the evade units they can't normally and to dispel the courage and re-raise that normally gives them headaches. What that means is, number one, you have to actually use the limit break on your intended targets. What I mean by that is, let's say you're going against a team where the tank is farther out ahead of the evade unit or the Jaden with the zombie mask in the back. Well, that limit break, if they use it on a tank that doesn't really have that re-raise or courage, you've essentially wasted your trump card early. And that goes doubly for second attacks in Guild Wars or second defense in Guild Wars. If you are solely relying on that limit break to win you your fight, you're going to get more inconsistent results. So I think being able to play around the limit break is actually a way you can neuter some of his strength. That, yeah, go ahead, blow the limit break on the tank. It's 100% hit chance. He wasn't going to miss the tank anyway. The tank didn't have courage anyway. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a huge loss in that regard. But other than that, I think it's probably just smart AI. And I do think there's some things to be exposed with the non-elemental attacks. Specifically, if you're talking about like in the next month, you're going to see a ton of Dark out here, right? Dark Fina, very popular unit. For the most part, we've had Comet turned off when we play with her. We much prefer the unit imperil ability and what the synergy has for that. Now, all of a sudden, being able to throw Comet as a typeless attack at Sephiroth, who is basically getting all his bulk from elemental resists, actually is a great way to just blow him out of the water. So I do think that is one potential way to expose him. And it's not common, but it's something to at least keep in the back of your mind. Yeah. How about you?
Actually, you mentioned Sorrow earlier too, and he's got the barrier break on a. It's non-elemental as well, so
yep.
Yeah, that's going to be great against Sephiroth.
Discontinuum is, I think, right? I don't know if it's the barrier break that's the elemental.
That's true. A Strike of Ruin, I think, is the barrier break and courage removal. Yeah,
but
he does have a non-elemental.
Yep, your point stands exactly right. There's a way to get around it.
Obviously, it's going to be kind of like who draws first in that situation, because if Sorrow is out in front and getting into range, he can. Sephiroth is probably going to be able to one-shot him as well. So,
yeah.
But
yeah, any other weaknesses you noticed so far, or things you wanted to bring up?
Obviously, it's a singular unit, and PvP is a lot more than a singular unit. So I think other stuff I have is probably going to be more about like team stuff. So why don't we kind of look into some of that stuff?
Yeah, talking about the meta impact discussion. What do you think about that if we're going down that road?
Well, I mean, obviously, we've been saying for a while now, like a lot of people are going to be pulling for this unit. It's going to be like an Leonis situation where he's going to be all over the game in all aspects of the game, whether it's arena or a class match or guild war. He's a hype unit. Like, this is an all-time villain from Final Fantasy VII, which is probably one of the most popular Final Fantasies of all time. He's going to be everywhere. And he's good too, so that's the thing. And he's in a good elements. Dark obviously is one of those candidates that you look for potentially on defense too, because of the lack of elemental counter.
Yep.
So yeah. How about you? What do you think about his place in the top 10? Or do you think you'll see him everywhere there as well?
So we will, at least for the first month. This is actually really interesting. I've been meaning to talk about this. So I'm 100% on board with you. I think he's going to have Elena-like impact on the broader player base. He's going to be everywhere for quite some time, and you're not going to get away from him. There's an interesting thing going on, though, in the, we'll say, higher end of the game, where he actually is a little bit of a flash in the pan for the impact that he has. And I'll give Odaiba credit for this, because I was asking and talking about this with him, where one of the things that holds Sephiroth back isn't himself, it's actually the dark element that holds him back. Where when you look at the next like 6 months, the units that are coming out, dark is not it. Dark is like done for what they really get. And so when you look at who you fill out that cast of characters with, there are obviously good dark units. Night of Ruined Stern is great. Dark Fina is one of the best characters, but Halloween Lucia is, again, very quickly going to show her 70 cost status here and get blown away by a lot of things. She's still going to be very popular, but not nearly the oppressiveness that you would think. Lemuray is still in the mix for like haste and quicken and whatnot, but the dark cast overall doesn't bring enough to him to make him compete with what else is going to come out in the next 6 months. And then when you consider the job-based vision cards, where a lot of characters are getting newfound synergies with them, he's not one of them because it's a katana, so he's not getting those benefits of many of the other job-based vision cards. And then even Dark Bahamut that's coming out with the light and dark cast overall. There might be some interesting things here with Sylvia at play, where, you know, if you throw Sylvia in the mix with Sephiroth and a dark character, and maybe there's a new synergy that we didn't see prior. But I actually think this might be where Shadow Links on Ice actually starts making a little bit of sense for the top end of the game. We'd already used her a little bit, but bear with me on this. When she first came out, a lot of people were really dinging her, saying she's got no courage, she's got no re-raise, she's got no barrier, none of this. And when you're playing against Sephiroth, none of that matters. So all of a sudden, you have an extra dark unit to play with that has the access to the Pierce. You mentioned a Dark Imperil. Her limit break is the Dark Imperil. She also has the missile type attack on the sub job. There's a lot of things in her kit that, and she has a decreased counter chance of 100, where if you're talking about that counter matchup as well, she's got Protect that she can give Sephiroth to increase that physical bulkiness. I think that's one of those characters that might have some downward trending meta impacts, not oppressively so, but probably more than you would have thought 2 months ago.
No, good point about kind of the supporting cast. It's not that he himself kind of has gotten worse. You know, I think there's obviously going to be a lot of new units that kind of are maybe close to his power level or similar. I think about like Bradley, who's gotten a lot of hype. Yeah, it's exactly that. The dark cast just doesn't have that oomph. Like Dark Fina is one of the earlier ones, and her 140 upgrade is very kind of like average or even below average. Like obviously her base kit is good and she's still going to be a good unit, but she doesn't really get enough oomph to really, continue the conversation that Sephiroth is starting, kicking off the 140s.
Yep.
The one sort of area where they do get some nice awakenings is the lower cost units. So like we mentioned, Leela, Whisper is another one I think that gets like a pretty decent upgrade.
She does.
Another low cost unit. I know in JP, Whisper was getting a little bit of play, but again, they're the lower cost units. They're units with flaws. They're not ones that are generally going to be able to carry you when players are able to field a full team of cost 100 units.
Right.
They're more so, I think, going to be showing what they can do in the limited stuff.
Yeah, absolutely agreed on that. Kind of mentioned it too, like what early comps should you expect to see in the next couple of weeks with Sephiroth? I think we already kind of nailed the nail on the head. Dark Fina, obviously a great candidate. Night of Ruined Stern, I still think is a great candidate. Now, his mastery ability with that barrier will get broken by Sephiroth's AoE, so that's not as much of a strength as it was for him in the weeks prior. But I do specifically like one thing about Night of Ruined Stern to kind of supplement what Sephiroth can't do is actually the AoE healing power down. There's a ton of characters right now, right? In addition to just supports, but a ton of characters that have that buff where it's like fall below 40% HP, regen 50% health. That's a legitimate form of effective HP. That's a legitimate like health pool buff. If you can bring Night of Ruined Stern in to kind of neuter that healing power, Sephiroth can't do that. I like that matchup, but yeah, obviously the Anima, that vision card does have some great slash synergies too. So yeah, a lot of different people to play with here. What do you think?
One thing I was thinking about is, one of the more popular teams right now is Flagbearer Glaciella, and specifically a lot of players like to use her against dark teams, and that's going to be a little bit more challenging when Sephiroth comes in because she relies heavily on that barrier, And Dark, Ruinstern, he has a barrier break, but it's a little bit closer range. Sephiroth is going to be able to break that barrier much easier, and that's going to be a lot harder for Glaciella to deal with. Obviously, she has some AOE resistance, and she's got pretty good slash resistance and things like that. But the thing about the matchup with Sephiroth too is that he's got big pierce resistance. He starts off with 25% pierce resistance, so that's cutting her damage big time, right off the bat.
Yep.
Not even talking any gear or cards or espers at that point. So
exactly. Well, good. All right. Well, I think that basically wraps up what we wanted to talk about with Sephiroth here. Obviously, we're going to go more in depth individually, where we can kind of get into the nitty gritty of things. But looking ahead just a little bit here, we are going to forego some of the JP side of things. I know we got news on Howlet and Dia, but there's so much going on in global.
We'll come back to it.
Yeah, exactly. Staying on the global topic, we actually did get kind of a sneak peek from the devs where the global exclusive characters are going to get a blend of either or both their MA2s and their dream upgrades, which is obviously super exciting. They mentioned specifically Fryevia, Immortal Zazan, Elena, and Dwayne. I know Elena and Dwayne have not got their MA2s yet. Things that we are looking forward to. And Dwayne did get his already at this point in the JP timeline. A lot of us kind of scratching our heads why we didn't get it yet. I do have some hope, though, if I may, and we'll talk about Hyoh in a second on that same note, but I am hoping they have kind of a small rework in mind for Dwayne, that on that topic of the dark element being a little bit on the lighter side, that if they can give Dwayne something slightly more impactful, he might be able to fulfill the role that they need. That's kind of my hope, but we'll see if that actually materializes or not.
My ears definitely perked up when they said they were going to give that GL Fest there kind of in mid-April. Actually, in my latest video, I kind of called it and said that's exactly what's going to happen. But yeah, it came to pass. Obviously, 4 units coming in, getting 140s. That's a pretty big divergence of what's going to happen in our meta versus what happened in JP. Yep. Obviously they have Elena, but she actually got her 140 much later. I think it came. I think we were expecting it sometime in May or late May. So this is maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks early for her.
Yep.
Maybe they're going to throw in the MA2 there for her. Dwayne, obviously, like you said, horrible MA2 and JP, just, some HP and attack. It was super whatever. So I agree. I think that maybe, thinking of him as one of the earliest GL Fest units, maybe they'll throw him a bone and make it a little bit better. And he doesn't have his 140 even today in JP. So I'm super interested to see what that's going to be, in general.
Yeah. No, I think they've done a good job overall when it comes to GL tweaks, because they obviously know what they're getting with JP. They know what fans hated. They know what metas went stale for too long. And I think they try to do things to shake that up in global. For instance, I always think of the water meta with Astrius and Celeste. We didn't get the full effect of that because they released Esther. Bam, there you go. So I think these, global upgrades will hopefully do some of that, where, we don't see Earth very much yet. Immortal Zazan obviously is going to help foster that new Earth meta. And even Fryevia has been backseat to Snow this whole time. All of a sudden, maybe she brings someone to the table that Snow can't. I'm intrigued.
So what would be your wish list for Fryevia and Zazan?
For Fryevia, shoot, it's I would probably prefer some kind of more permanent stat in the way of defense and spirit for her, or at least some kind of all elemental resist as well. Right now, having defense, she's no defense or spirit innately, none, which is crazy for me as a tank. That she gets it off the spell Veil Blade, but that's dispellable. So take what you will from it. But I would like just some of that little bit extra of bulk. She obviously has really no offensive output. I'm okay if they want to go that route. Just lean into her being a stalwart rock that can take magic damage and support her teammates with some Curata and whatnot. So if they gave her a healing power buff, I would actually really like that. How about you?
That would be nice. Yeah. I would like to see potentially some cast time reduction on her. Which, I mean, she's a Spellblade main job. It's not something that affects that particular job. And they haven't really generally given buffs that are kind of catered towards the sub jobs in the past. But I think it's something that she could really use, obviously, as kind of being that healer / tank.
Yeah.
So that would be, kind of number one.
Yep.
I would also like to maybe see like an increase of range on maybe an attack or two. That would certainly help her out.
Yeah, she doesn't have nearly enough buffs. I mean, she's got Protect and Shell, which she does have the kind of AI that will use it and move forward, which is nice. she doesn't have the white mage AI that'll stand still and cast Protect and Shell. So it is kind of a happy medium there, but you're right, to be able to have some extra range, there are times where she's just like not doing much between the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did like this the Spellblade upgrade of her getting a bunch of AP and then the 100% hit on Spellveil Blade.
Yep.
That was actually low-key pretty even way more impactful than her MA2 was, which was, I think both of us gave that one the thumbs down.
We did. But in hindsight, I'm trending the other way. I didn't realize at the time how steep the game was going to go with its penetrations and whatnot. And the flat HP percent actually ended up being a little more material than I thought it would be. She's still amongst the top of effective HP when I look at characters.
What about Zazan? What would you like to see for him?
I mean, Zazan's big thing for me is also range. He's way too single target oriented and way too short range oriented, which kind of makes sense because he's got like 2 buffs that you want to get off every single time. But I don't know. He's just not impactful enough for me, and he does get hit by enough things that you can't be an evade unit that get hit by that many things and not do enough damage. We've talked about bulking him up the opposite and say, all right, drop the evasion, just make him a tanky unit that can kind of evade, and that works too. But like, there's just better earth units. I don't know if there's a right answer for him for me, other than maybe just I don't even know. I really don't.
I would like to see like an AP restore or an AP reduction while his courage is active. I think.
Yeah. Sorry, his AP management is trash. It's awful.
Oh yeah,
that's a fantastic suggestion. Yeah, he needs that.
Yeah. I think that would be pretty huge for him. For Elena, her 140 was like, it was kind of like giving her like a little bit of accuracy and stuff in JP. I didn't love it. I hope that they do something different for us.
Yep.
I hope that they don't give her like the avoid sure hit thing though, because I really don't want to see I don't want to see light evade anymore for a while. Personally.
No, I hope
I want
to
just go away for a little while.
Yeah, give the other light units a chance to shine. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't have a creative thing to give her either, quite honestly. It would probably just be some tweak to an ability to give it an extra status effect or something. I couldn't tell you what. Maybe a small imperil, like a 25% light imperil. We've talked about this. There are no real active light imperils in many of their good characters. There's other kinds of imperils, but light specifically isn't one of the ones that you see more prevalently. So yeah, if you want to, on her basic whatever 14 AP attack, add in a 25% light imperil, I wouldn't hate that. I think it'd be pretty decent. And then,
so what about the big news from the stream? Everybody, actually, it was leaked early, which was I guess intern Kuhn was made another mistake there.
Yep.
But yeah, Hyoh is coming to town.
Yes.
Which both of us were big FFBE players. He was like an all-time, like probably one of the hypest moments from playing FFBE.
Yep.
So yeah, huge amount of nostalgia for me with that guy. So he's going to be fire too, which is, I've been waiting for a new 100 cost unit. I thought I was going to have to wait till Kefka.
Yep.
But Hyoh's coming to town, and yeah, super stoked.
Me too. Yeah, obviously a ton of nostalgia, like you said. Even before Esther, before any of those characters in FFB, he was one of the original like big chainers that came in and just did insane amount of damage, and it was very easy to use the chain on the cell phone, be able to tap and time it correctly, and obviously like cool design. He's a giant red lightsaber essentially, and just clad in black. I love that they made him fire. I love that he's a global exclusive. They nailed the choice from a fan perspective. You mentioned this last week. Like, we're kicking ourselves in our 2022 video. We had like 5 most anticipated units, and neither of us put Hyoh on there because we both kind of assumed he was a grand slam to be added eventually. But like, he really is like one of the ones we were looking forward to.
Yeah, I thought for sure, like, I can't believe he's coming to global first. Like, I thought, okay, yeah, he's going to be like Reagan. He's going to go to JP, then we'll get him. And yeah, that's fine. But like the fact that he's being debuted here, I think is awesome. I think that was probably one of like the best moves that Gumi could do to kind of generate some hype and generate some excitement for. Obviously, he's not coming right at the 3rd anniversary. They don't want to step on Sephiroth's toes. They're gonna bring him out like a month later. So definitely you gotta keep some Viz stocked for him coming in the game.
Yep. Very interested what they do for a vision card for him. It's probably going to be job based, I would imagine. I don't know what they could do for a kid for him either, quite honestly. We already have so many good slashes in the game. I hope they get a little creative and do something kind of cool with him.
Well, he's probably going to be great sword and probably going to be plate maybe, I mean, we do have, the fire and lightning synergy is going to be coming into town pretty shortly after the third anniversary with Dark Ifrit.
Yep.
And then obviously there's a couple of pretty good lightning characters on the way too. So
That's right.
my thought is they were kind of maybe thinking of Hyoh as a bridge for fire and lightning. Like maybe you're looking at Viga or Alphonse, and that's going to be your powerhouse fire lightning combo.
Yep. Him and Esther. Obviously, Esther's a great sword as well.
Esther as well.
Throw her in the mix, and you have the two FFBE originals, or not original. Yeah, I guess the original.
I hope that we definitely pick up some new players there. That'd be nice.
Definitely. Yep. In addition to all the Addison Ray fans coming in. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Can't forget about them.
All right, and that brings us to our last section here, Leonis Town Square, the Q&A. Obviously, this is running a little bit longer, so we're only going to one question this week, but please keep them coming. We are keeping a backlog of them, and we'll continue to answer them. But in the meantime, the question that we were going to look at this week was, do either of you use selection quest units in PvP? I'm a Day 1 Dolphin. I have a few elements that are very strong with many unit options, some elements that I don't. I filled these weaker elements with selection quest units and after floor 14 and job upgrades. I'm having a lot of success. Wondering if you guys have used any with success as well.
Yeah, so I'll kick it off. I can't say that I've used any of them recently, at least for sort of the day-to-day Guild War. I have definitely used them in the past. I think when the Jalen meta was going on, I did use Rachis a few times.
Yep.
She can be built fairly accurate, and she's pretty decent against magical skill damage. Another one that I've used that we talked about earlier was Minwu for a fire team.
Yep.
I've used teams with Kingmont, Satya, and Minwu, and Minwu just kind of stays back in haste and then just throws out Law of Invigoration and actually works pretty well.
Yep.
Aside from that, I think the other units, not a ton. Like I've tried my best to get Moraga to work. Really, his best forte is against physical, and if you can find pure physical teams, like he can do decent enough. Aside from that, I think the most use I get out of selection quest units is from PvE, like guild raids and stuff like that, like Rachis, who I just talked about, Moraga. There's a lot of good uses, when it comes to PvE. So
I would agree. Yeah,
you?
PvE, same thing. Miraga and Rachis are absolute staples for a variety of them. Guild raids, Rachis, and Trials of Reckoning, and a whole bunch of things. For PvP, I'll be honest, I probably used none of them with success. Now, that being said, to the person who submitted this, I've always said this. If you are having success with that character, keep at it, obviously, right? Like this game can be played a bunch of different ways and different levels of competition. So that's not saying that to stop. Please keep using them, obviously. But personally, I haven't. There was a brief window that I think we used Camille against the Black Rose Elena meta, where he was one of the few characters that actually could potentially one-shot her, but that window was very, very small. Other than that, I think we might have thrown in Minwu for like maybe a map, but even then, her time was very limited as well. Other than that, it's really very limited for PvP potential. I've tinkered with Miraga as well. He's done okay, not good enough to be the optimal team though, so obviously you just end up benching them. I've honestly just found more of their equipments to be more valuable, quite honestly, than the characters themselves. Obviously, like the Velen accessory, those boots, is like an S tier piece of equipment in the game. It's an exceptionally good piece of equipment. But no, unfortunately, not even Lamega, not one of the stronger dark units. I don't even have who's the ice unit? Rafal. I don't even have her as Dawn level 10. Like that's how much I like don't need her or haven't needed her. But to the questioner's point, if you have a weaker element, they obviously are good enough characters to still do well for you. So I do encourage people to still get them. It is that when you talk about the highest levels of PvP specifically, yeah, probably not a strong window for them.
Yeah. I think like in kind of the upper ends, like maybe for limited stuff, like if you need to cut some costs, that's one area you might look at them. But yeah, overall, they're not units that you ever really see.
No, and I wouldn't say they're significantly cheaper than the alternatives either. If they were very cheap units, that'd be a big feather in their cap. But I don't see that economy working out for them. All right, well, that covers everything as best we possibly could. Obviously, there's more we could go into. We wanted to talk about the maps way more in depth. Shoot, we could keep talking about Hyoh for another 10 minutes if we wanted.
Yeah, just too much this week.
Yeah, just too. But this is still obviously awesome. You know, we're looking forward to continuing. I know, JB, you're going on vacation the end of this week, so
Yeah.
we won't have a regular Monday podcast next week. We'll see if I can maybe just, I don't know, do one solo or bring on a guest speaker or who knows what. But at least figured we mentioned that here. But
Yeah, I'm gonna be going away down to South America, going to Patagonia. So it's gonna be a good little vacation. Good to get away for a little bit. So I will catch everybody in the next one. Probably gonna be a couple weeks for me until I'm back.
That sounds good. Well, everyone enjoy third anniversary. Good luck polling on Wednesday, and we'll talk to you all soon. Have a good night. Take care, everybody.
See you next time.